energy levels. We'll just scream really, we got you in the back. All right, all corners of the room are alive. So we'll just be really, really loud and make everyone feel jealous that they're not a part of the most amazing Duckweed in the Data Center session taking place here. It's on fire, it's crazy. People are taking their clothes off. No, they're not. Where are you going? All right. Listen, Duckweed in the Data Center is pretty cool if you don't ask me. It's a very interesting concept that we wanted to talk about that really resonates with the idea of learning from unexpected places. So Digital Realty, the company that's putting this thing together, is a data center company. Surprise, surprise. And one of the things that we have in our data centers is fuel. And not everyone knows that, but probably there's some people here who are in the industry and maybe they know a thing or two about data centers. There's about 80,000 gallons of fuel, diesel fuel, in the basement or at some level of each one of those data centers. Wow. There's one right there, 60 Hudson, and one right here, 32 A of A. That's a lot of fuel. One of the reasons for that is to make sure that the building keeps running, especially during events like Hurricane Sandy, which we ended up having fuel trucks come in here and replenishing those resources so that we continue to make sure that the internet and the cloud worked. So it's really important. But then we talk about sustainability, and we talk about some of the other things that we do, and certainly Digital Realty is doing some sustainability efforts to make sure that the energy that we're using is 100% renewable. We actually had a press release about that not too long ago. We have Rafi here in the room, Rafael Valdez. He is in our engineering energy group at Digital Realty. You can certainly talk with him if you have any questions about sustainability. But I wanted to go ahead and first talk about something that was out of the box, which is, what if you used an alternative fuel source, a biofuel like duckweed, to handle some of the fuel that we have in these data centers? Like maybe there's another way of utilizing or enhancing the energy that we are using in these data centers. And so we really wanted this session to be something more inspiring and more open-minded, but also a little bit more hands-on from an engineering perspective, especially coming back from Simone's talk. We wanted to explore maybe if you could use something like duckweed for the data center. But first, we need to understand a little bit more about duckweed. So we do have Philomena Chu, who is here, and she's from Rutgers, and she's going to be talking about just the basics of duckweed, and then going into some of the other sustainable fuels and sources of energy that you could use. And then we're going to hear from JP from Emerson, and he's going to talk a little bit about what Emerson does for the data center. But there is also a challenge that's going to be presented to you as well. It's an opportunity, a contest, where you can submit one of your crazy, zany ideas, now that we've been warmed up from Simone, of something that is sustainable, and you will be able to do that towards the end of this conversation. We will announce the winners of that, and your chances are pretty good of winning, considering there's not too many people here in the room. So you have that opportunity to go ahead and submit that. We'll make the URL available for you in a couple of minutes here, and you'll have that chance to go ahead. And it's just like, the form is super easy. It's like 3 things, and then you enter it, and then we're going to review the submissions, and then we're going to base it on a couple of parts of criteria. And creativity is certainly one of them, so go nuts. And then we will announce the winners at 5 o'clock downstairs when we announce the winners of the hackathon winners. So you definitely want to be there where we had lunch today at 5 o'clock to see who won. So please submit those responses. So to get kicked off, I'm going to have Philomena take the stage, and she's going to tell you a thing or two about duckweed. Philomena.
Okay. This? Hold on. Okay. Hi, I'm Philomena, and today I'm going to talk to you about my favorite plant called duckweed. Okay, so imagine that you are kayaking down a calm, peaceful river, and you come to this scene. Maybe it's a scene that you've already seen before. It's a bright green mat, and maybe you think that this is algae, but actually it's duckweed. Duckweed is a small flowering plant. It's the smallest flowering plant, and it comes in lots of different types, lots of different sizes. These are 3 of the most common duckweed species that I work with in the lab. You can see on the left, Spirodella polyrhiza is commonly known as the large duckweed, and in contrast to that, there's Wolfia, which is one of the smallest duckweeds. So it's found all over the world except for Antarctica. Duckweed, as its name suggests, it grows really quickly. So, this is going to work. Oops. This is a time-lapse video. Well, it's a time-lapse video of duckweed rapidly budding over the course of 14 days. So it'd be really cool if it worked, but it didn't work. So, but actually duckweed can grow on wastewater. So duckweed uses wastewater as a cheap and abundant fertilizer. It uses the nutrients in the wastewater that would otherwise contaminate waterways if it was released. It uses those nutrients to support its growth. And actually, after it grows on the wastewater, you can harvest that duckweed for downstream products. And as a result, the wastewater is then cleaned and can be safely returned back into the environment. So what's one person's poop is another person's gold mine, right? Okay, so after you harvest that duckweed grown on wastewater, you can actually use it to produce a lot of different types of products. So for example, we have fuel, we have pharmaceuticals, you can turn it into PLA or plastics, or you could directly feed it to chickens, ducks, or fish as high-protein animal feed. But today, I want to focus on duckweed as a fuel and specifically as an ethanol feedstock. So you might be wondering, how do you actually produce ethanol from duckweed? Currently in the US, corn is our main bioethanol feedstock. Basically, you grow the corn up, you extract starch from the corn, and then you break the starch down into individual sugar units, ferment the sugar into ethanol, and this is a very similar process as in brewing beer, but except here, we're then blending the ethanol with gasoline to power your car, all right? This process is not that sustainable because you're using a lot of fertile land, you're using a lot of fresh water and fertilizer that is very costly economically and environmentally. In contrast, we believe that duckweed is a much more sustainable option than corn as a feedstock because you don't necessarily need arable land. And if you're growing the duckweed on wastewater, you can actually, you don't need fresh water or fertilizer. So this is a much more sustainable option. So I did some back of the envelope calculations to calculate a theoretical maximum of how much ethanol you could actually produce from duckweed in a year. So if you took all the wastewater that is generated, well, the municipal wastewater that is generated in the US on a daily basis, and you use that to grow duckweed on, you can actually, in a year, produce more ethanol from duckweed than is currently produced from corn, and you can use less land to do it. So pretty cool. Okay, so let's recap what I just told you. Duckweed grows really fast. You can grow it on wastewater. And you can clean that wastewater so that it can be returned safely back into the environment. And duckweed can be more sustainable than corn. Okay, so where do we go from here? How can we make this a reality? We actually work with an international duckweed community. These are members from all over the world. They range from scientists, researchers at universities or research institutes who tend to be more focused on basic duckweed biology. And that ranges to entrepreneurs, small business startups who want to use duckweed as a sustainable feedstock. So if you're interested in more information about duckweed, you can go to lemnapedia.org and read all about it. So one group that we met through this international duckweed community and that we collaborate with is Mama Grande. They are a social biotech company based out of Buenos Aires, Argentina. Their business model takes a three-pronged approach. They are trying to create jobs. They're creating bioplastics from duckweed grown on wastewater, and they're cleaning that water to be safely returned back into the environment. They have secured $5 million from public and private investors, 60% which came from the Argentine government. And they've partnered with Aguas del Norte, which is a water treatment company in Argentina. They are building the largest duckweed wastewater treatment system in the world. Their location is on 150 hectares in the northwest region of Argentina. This is also a wine country. And they are currently building their first biorefinery. So we are very excited to see what's going to happen next. Okay, so we need help, collaboration from industry, but we also need help from the government and from policy to drive clean energy and renewable fuels in the US. A great example of this is the Renewable Fuel Standard Program that was originated in 2005 and then expanded in 2007. The goals of the RFS are to lower greenhouse gas emissions and lower our reliance on foreign oil imports. The RFS mandates that a certain percentage of transportation fuel in the US contain renewable fuels in increasing volumes over time. So this is a great driver of production and consumption of renewable fuels in the US, and we hope that it can help open a market for duckweed to be widely adopted as a feedstock. Okay, so because I'm interested in energy and I spend most of my time in the lab, at the bench, I realized that I need more legislative experience. So I took a fellowship from the Eagleton Institute of Politics at Rutgers, and I interned at the New Jersey State Legislature in the spring semester, where I learned that, yes, indeed, policymaking is very messy, but that there is value in scientific input and getting more scientists involved in the legislative process. Ultimately, I hope to be able to leverage my technical scientific training with my knowledge of how government and politics works to affect meaningful environmental change. So if you have any questions, you can email me, you can check out our lab website, or you can go to the Duckweed Stock Cooperative to learn more about duckweed. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Philomena. So Philomena gives you one view into how sustainability works. It takes a village. It takes a world. The academic world certainly is part of it. You've heard a little bit about how you have to actually involve yourself with some politics as well to move some things forward. And I know I just saw Tim Lance walk in, and he certainly knows a thing or two about trying to get an idea forward so that people will actually listen to why something like climate change is important and that you should do something about it. But the industry is also a huge partner in making some of these things come to light. So we do have Emerson here as well, JP from Emerson. Here's some other renewable energy sources as well before I let JP take the stage. Some things for you to think about. Again, if you just walked in, we are going to do a challenge at the very end of the session where you have the ability to submit an idea, a sustainability idea, perhaps using duckweed or perhaps using something else from one of these other renewable energy sources. But be creative, think out of the box, listen to what you've heard from the academic side, listen to what you've heard from the industry side, and see what kind of crazy ideas you can come up with. And again, we'll announce those winners at 5 o'clock downstairs. So without further ado, Mr. JP.
So again, JP Valiuis, I represent Emerson Network Power. We provide thermal and power and software infrastructure solutions for data centers. I'm representing the thermal management side. That's the side of the business I work in. And we kind of pride ourselves in providing the most efficient and the most reliable sort of thermal management solutions for data centers. So, you know, we talked about sustainability. I think the goal here, and we've been thinking about this for many, many years of how to reduce the amount of energy cooling has to use in a data center. We have reference designs for what we call net zero cooling solutions and all sorts of interesting ideas. But ultimately, what we're trying to do is, and I think, you know, sustainability may mean a lot to different people, but we're trying to sort of leave our environment, our communities, and those around us better off than where we found them, okay? And so one of the things that we've done at Emerson a lot is there's 3 areas that we focus a lot on to try to do this. Number one is the existing data centers that you have, there's enormous amounts of opportunity to reduce your energy usage. We'll talk about that in a second. Secondly, if you're building a new data center, there's a lot of ways to leverage nature, leverage air, if you will, the outside air, to significantly reduce your energy cost. And thirdly, you know, the topic of water usage is becoming much more important, and the idea of eliminating water usage altogether, particularly in areas where water is a scarce resource. So to date, with some of the technology that I'm going to talk about here, and this is a technology that Digital Realty has adopted very broadly, is we've saved over 1 billion gallons of water in 2016 alone, and that will double next year, and over 1 billion sort of kWh, right, kilowatt hours, right? And this is not all the technology we offer, but just the specific technology that Digital Realty has been deploying. So some unique opportunities here to do this. So let me just talk about that. So first of all, if you have an existing data center, there's 4 general areas you should be thinking about. Number one is your operating parameters. So how hot is your data center? What are your temperatures? Okay, raising those up is the first thing you need to think about. Secondly is broadening your humidity ranges, because the equipment you have today is much more able to withstand broader humidity ranges. And finally, managing your airflow. All 3 of those are fairly simple things to do that will save a lot of energy. The second thing you need to do is make sure that your IT load, that your cooling equipment can flux up and down with your IT load, right? You would never own a car that was always running at 10,000 RPM regardless you're going at 1 miles an hour or 50 miles an hour, right? So the same way with the data center, right? Your cooling load needs to flex up and down with your IT load, and many data centers today are still not there. So that's the second point. The third one is the advancement in controls over the past sort of 3 to 5 years have been extraordinary in the data center. So now we have machine-to-machine. We've had this for a while within Emerson, but machine-to-machine communication. So your cooling units can all communicate with one another and work together as a group to make the unit, make the whole solution, the ecosystem, more efficient, but also provide a much higher level of protection. So there's a little bit of, so if there's something wrong, if someone's fallen asleep on a floor tile over there and it gets a little hot over there, the equipment can compensate and somewhat what we call self-heal the data center. So there's, again, a higher level of protection and a higher level of efficiency by this machine-to-machine communication and the more advanced controls. And then finally, some of the new technologies we'll talk about are significantly more efficient. So if you have an old DX-based system that you installed maybe 10 years ago, the new technology today will be anywhere from 50 to 80% more efficient depending how you're running it. So let's talk about that, one of the new technologies. So we call this the Libre DSE. It's probably the hottest new technology now in the data center market, because it provides a sort of world-class efficiency with absolutely no outside air coming into the data center and no water usage at all. And so the way it works is, if you look at this, it's a fairly standard, what we call DX-based system, where I have my indoor unit. In this case, is a state-of-the-art crack unit with very high sort of advanced controls and efficiency in terms of its components. You have your typical outdoor, this is a microchannel condenser, which is new technology for data centers, much more quiet, much more efficient. And the unique thing about this is a pump. So you don't see pumps in DX systems, okay? But this is sort of very new, this is brand new. And what the benefit of this is, if the temperatures drop cold enough outside, you can shut off one or both of your circuits, okay? So you shut off one or both of your compressors, and you can replace this 8.9 kW of power with a fraction of the power. So what I do is I simply pump the refrigerant into the data center. It absorbs the heat from the data center. It's then pumped outside. The outside air then cools the refrigerant, and it circles back around, right? So again, it consumes a fraction of the amount of energy, as you can see here. A fraction amount of energy, but again, no water usage and no outside air at all. So it, unique, sort of kind of the best of both worlds. Now, what is this? Now, let's see. Let's look at this. Let me give you a specific example. If this happens to be in Los Angeles, California, and my return air temperatures, which means my temperature is coming back to the cooling unit at about 95 degrees. Seems a little hot, but actually quite reasonable. That means my supply air temperatures going into a data center are in the low 70s, right? So again, very standard today in data center design, very reasonable. And in this case, I have both compressors turned off 95% of the time throughout the year, okay? So essentially for 95% of the time, I'm using 100% free cooling. I'm simply using outside air. I'm pumping around the refrigerant using outside air to cool that liquid or that fluid off. That's all I'm doing. 5% of the year, I'm only using one circuit. You can see here by the green, I'm in partial economization mode. I'm using just one circuit, okay? And then it doesn't even appear as a percentage, right? I mean, less than 1% of the year, I'm using both compressors. So essentially what you have with this new technology is you have a free cooling system that's using outside air almost all the time, and your DX or your compressors are only there for backup. They're only there on the hottest, sort of worst possible days, right? So that's kind of a new thinking now in data center cooling, right? If you had looked at this same chart using old technology, you'd be in compressor mode 70 to 80% of the time. And then sort of in old technology, economization mode less than that. So again, a very unique technology. Now, and this is, I would suggest to you, this is the, Digital Realty has adopted this technology broadly throughout its portfolio because it provides that sort of efficiency, but also a very high level of reliability. Now let's talk about water usage because that's becoming more important now, and this gives you an example of San Francisco, California. It used to be that people moved away, 5 years ago, they were moving away from DX-based systems because they were not as efficient. But with the DSE, you see a system that's actually going to be more efficient than a chill water system, but with no water. So take a 1 megawatt representative example of a data center. You see here that compared to the chill water, the DSE solution, the pump refrigerant economizing solution is 16% more efficient. So it uses 16% less energy and no water. So you're saving about 4 million gallons of water per megawatt of cooling, right? So you think about that, that's quite a bit, right? I mean, these data centers now that can be 20, 30, 50 megawatts of cooling, that's enormous amounts of water savings. So kind of a unique technology now that, again, being deployed broadly by Digital Realty and by others in the industry. The other technology that you might hear about is evaporative cooling. You have a lot of the social media players that for a while were bringing outside air right into the data center, and there's some struggles with that, right? Managing humidity can be a little challenging. In fact, there was a big, we'll call it, social media company that actually had rain inside their data center. So they created enough humidity inside their data center because they weren't able to. They had a day where the temperatures dropped about 30 degrees because a storm came in. Temperatures dropped 30 degrees, humidity went up to obviously 100%, and they weren't able to control the humidity, so they had a cloud within the cloud, right? It started raining inside their data center, which is, as you guys know, not a good idea. So what the people have moved away from that a little bit, moving to what we call indirect evaporative, right? Where I'm still using the outside air. I'm bringing in this what we call scavenger outside air in, okay? And it's cooling off a plate-to-plate heat exchanger. And then my data center air is in pass-through. The air paths do not intercede. They cross paths through a heat exchanger. So I'm bringing outside air that cools the heat exchanger, and the data center is then cooled and brought back in. Again, a very efficient thing. I'm using a lot of the free cooling most of the time, but another technology that you see out there quite a bit. So I just wanted to, again, point that out to you because I think that there's a lot of stuff we want to talk about in the future. There's a lot of things on a roadmap in terms of even saving more efficiency, more advanced controls to sort of give you a higher level of protection, even save more energy. A lot of stuff in the future, but I want to at least showcase you some of the things that we're doing today that are making impact today, and a very significant impact today. And you get a lot of folks. And the beauty of being in the data center world is that sustainability is saving energy, right? And business are fully aligned, right? Because we want to save energy because it saves money. And these solutions that you have are not compromising the integrity of the data center at all. The beauty of the new technology is you're getting more efficiency, but you're actually giving a higher level of protection and more uptime in the data center. And that's the beauty of these new technologies. So we wanted to encourage you to sort of interact with you a little bit here. You see the website here that was talked about. Come up with ideas for, I don't care what they are, for how you might improve the sustainability of the data center. All right, come up with those ideas. We'll give you prizes for the most creative, the most practical, and the easiest to deploy. There's a website there. Just log on there. As I suggest, it's really easy to do that. And then give us your ideas, and there'll be some prizes awarded a little bit later. Thank you very much.
Thank you, JP. All right, so we're going to ask JP and Philomena a couple questions, and just to play with the idea of duckweed in the data center to see if there's really any plausibility in it whatsoever. But It's a little bonus for you guys. The few who came in, thank you so very much. You do have your chance here to win some of these prizes, which will be announced at 5 o'clock. If you want to go ahead and pull up that website right now, emersonnetworkpower.com/duckweed, do that, because this is your chance to maybe ask some questions of these two experts for sustainability to see if there's something that could maybe sway them to choose you. Never know. So let's talk about duckweed. And the data center. So I mentioned before, we have all this fuel that's sitting in the data center itself. What's the plausibility, and maybe I'll start with JP, if we just removed all of that fuel and replaced it with a sustainable fuel like duckweed? Do you think it's even possible?
Well, if it has the same characteristics of the fuel today, I think that's very possible.
Yeah.
No question.
Philomena, what would it need? What would duckweed need to be able to grow and flourish?
You need money and investment, R&D,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Do you need water though as well, I'm assuming?
Yeah, water, but you can use wastewater.
Yeah.
Right. I think a lot of the requirements for data centers, or the location of the data centers, are similar to requirements for if you're like for a duckweed wastewater lagoon. You need to be close to people, right?
There's a lot of people in New York City.
Yeah, there's a lot of wastewater being generated here.
Wow. So all of our wastewater could possibly be fueling the internet, which would be very crazy. Go ahead.
What about in New York, every 4 seasons? In winter, everything freezes. Is duckweed something that needs to be replanted each season, or the cost involved with that?
Yeah.
Right. So depending on which species you're using, some of them actually form these overwintering dormant structures called turions that will sink to the bottom of the pond or lake that it's in. So once it starts thawing, then it'll just like, not magically, but it will come back up to the surface, yeah. So there's that possibility.
Cool. What else would it take to actually make duckweed a viable solution in the data center? Do you need sunlight for it to grow?
Yeah, you need sunlight. It is a photosynthetic plant, right? So yeah, you need sunlight.
So what temperatures does it need?
As long as it's not freezing, it'll, I mean,
You could use the heat from the data center to heat a duckweed farm next to it, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you could do that. That would be interesting. How likely do you think it is that we would actually see duckweed in the data center in the next 10 years if someone actually wanted to try to do that? What would it take to make that happen? From, you mentioned money.
Money.
But what other barriers are there? What would it take for Emerson to do something like this?
Well, I think it's probably not up to Emerson as much because we don't make the generators, but a good example is if you're using fuel for generators, if it's a viable substitute for that fuel today, then it could be done, as soon as it's ready.
Right. Nothing is stopping us from using duckweed in the data center but ourselves. So, what questions do you guys have for either JP at Emerson or Philomena of Rutgers? We got one question.
Philomena, is duckweed an invasive species?
Yes.
Sorry,
yeah, right.
Is it an invasive species, duckweed?
I guess a lot of people consider it invasive. It depends on who you ask and what location you're in. So we like to think of it as, right, like it's one person's garbage or invasive species, but you can actually use that to your advantage and use it for a lot of the different value-added products that I talked about before. So, yeah. But it flourishes because there is a lot of fertilizer runoff, like nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus that come from farms and then accumulate a lot in these waterways, and that's where duckweed can actually flourish. That's what you might see it a lot, New York, New Jersey, in these canals, or sometimes I see it coming into the city on the New Jersey Transit, and it's in these like wastewater type places, so.
Any other questions? Got one, yes.
Pests, or is there anything to consider around pesticides or treatment?
Pesticides or treatments for duckweed? So, so are there any dangerous pesticides, or do you have to use pesticides?
Are there any, I guess, what kinds, how would you worry about
What are the pests with duckweed?
That area of research hasn't been that well studied because they haven't really found that many diseases that actually attack duckweed. There are things like slime molds that's a pathogen of duckweed. But other than that, it's pretty robust as a plant, as a system. So.
Cool. Oh yeah. Thank you. Do we have any other questions? We have Rafi over here who has a question.
Simple question. How can you accelerate the growth of duckweed? Warmer climate, more food,
Yeah, more nutrients.
dirtier water?
Yeah, more nutrients, constant supply of light, that type of thing. Yeah, warmer temperatures, that type of thing. I do want to correct myself. You don't need sunlight. You can use artificial light. We keep our duckweed stock under artificial light. So.
I had a question about it as a fuel. How many kilojoules per gram of heat does it produce? Do you burn it, I'm assuming, and what does it release when you burn?
You could burn it if you were doing thermochemical conversion, but in the ethanol process we don't burn it. But yeah, I don't know the thermochemical conversion numbers off the top of my head, but I can look that up and we can talk about it more later.
I have a question. What other sustainability efforts is Emerson working on outside of the data center?
Well, I think that if you look at the future, you see different types of refrigerants, so lower GWP refrigerants. I mean, there's a lot of talk about CO2, which is a GWP of 1. So there's definitely, and that's, you see CO2 being used in grocery stores and other places in Europe. It hasn't quite gotten to data centers yet because of some technology that needs to catch up. But that's something that's kind of out there maybe in the horizon. And you're seeing more clever ways, again, of managing heat, because the way the heat's managed today and the way the airflow is managed today can still be a little bit inefficient. And so you're seeing a lot of focus on people putting sensors and supervisory level controls in the data center so they can have much better visibility into what's going on and learn much more what's going on at a much more granular level, and then be able to manage the heat through that process.
Any other questions? You're actually not going to win a kilo of carbon-friendly duckweed. That's a joke. But there is duckweed here up front that Philomena did bring. So if you do want to check out what duckweed looks like, Philomena will show you. But yes, you now have the opportunity to enter the contest where we will go ahead and take a look at those winners or those plausible winners here in a bit. So please submit your ideas. And be zany, again, be inspired by what just happened when we heard from Simone. There are no bad ideas, but there's creative, most practical, and easiest to deploy idea. So definitely take a swag at that. I want to thank JP and I want to thank Philomena for coming to Marketplace Live and to talking a little bit about duckweed and the data center. And if you have questions for these guys, they're going to be around for a little bit, I assume. Great. So thank you guys, and we'll chat soon.
Okay.
So up next, we do have Rackspace, who will be talking about multi-cloud. And if you want to just stick around for a couple more minutes,